Let's get into the Paris Commune, chat. Should we get into the Paris Commune? Let's get into the Paris Commune. Dan, a biblical name, Daniel. Yeah, but it feels wrong. Why is he called Dan? Call him Daniel. This is like when I learned that one of my oldest relatives that like came over on the Mayflower and helped found Boston was named Brian. I was like, Brian? That's not a Mayflower name. Brian? Really? It feels wrong. It feels wrong. There's a statue of him in Watertown, Boston. Brian Pendleton. Pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. Okay. So we're going to read the Paris Commune today, chat. So the left comms have been going crazy about this. They only know two things. They only know Gotha program, Paris Commune. Now, the reason why this is contextually important is because the Communist Manifesto debunks the central claims to many left-com theories. The left-com theories being that Karl Marx hated centralized government and thought everything should be radically decentralized, sometimes claiming that after the revolution, the state should be immediately abolished, sometimes claiming that Marx expected the mode of production to instantly change following a revolution under the dictatorship of the proletariat, that money should be abolished immediately, that commodity production should be abolished immediately. These are all the claims that the left comms make. But because all of this is debunked in the Communist Manifesto, the claim has to be made that Karl Marx actually changed his mind about these things. This is the claim. They're like, well, he changed his mind later in life. You know, this would be pretty major, right? This would, I would think, necessitate retractions, major edits of seminal founding works. This never happened. So, because Karl Marx never came forward and was like, I have changed my mind officially. I now think these things are essential, or you do not have a dictatorship of the proletariat, whatever. Because this never happened, these people have to point to hidden secret sentences in texts that I'm not confident they've ever read, and then grossly misinterpret them to try to prove this point, that Karl Marx actually changed his mind, and that is why they are the one true Marxists for believing things that directly go in opposition against the most entry-level Marx texts, like the Manifesto, right? So this is also why they subsequently have to claim randomly that they don't like Engels or things like that. Or they like Marx but not Engels, which makes no fucking sense. Because Engels literally helped develop Marxist theory. So, whatever. The Manifesto itself says he was written by Marx and Engels, depending on what version you have. So, we're back on this with the left comms. The left comms, they've got some overlord. They've got some dude version of me out there on the internet trying to make a bunch of teenagers into left comms, and we gotta fight them. They want to watch middle-aged people fight about Karl Marx on the internet. Anything but read a book. That sounds like not a good time to me. You could not pay me money as a teenager to watch middle-aged people fight about Karl Marx on the internet. But for them, apparently, it's a great time. Way more fun than reading. So I think they should just read the text themselves and hear what Marx has to say. What if Marx is actually a Maoist? Now you're asking the tough questions, Toby. And I appreciate it. I appreciate you for that. Marx was a left comm, exactly. Marx hated state. That's like their big thing. I don't know, it's crazy. And ultimately, there is one line in here that is such like a... There's two lines, really, but one in particular. It's such a slam dunk on this entire fucking thought process that it makes me feel cuckoo bananas crazy that people are claiming they have read this and still walking away with these beliefs. They have not read it. That's how you know they have not read it. So let's get into it. Left comms are the exact kind of Marxist that Marx said he was not. Exactly. Let's see if this is... We're going to be able to get through this all. Well, yeah, maybe we will. On the dawn of March 18th, Paris arose to the thunder burst of Vive la Commune. You like my French? What is the Commune, that sphinx so tantalizing to the bourgeois mind? The proletarians of Paris, said the Central Committee in its manifesto of March 18th, amidst the failures and treasons of the ruling class, have understood that the hour has struck for them to save the situation by taking into their own hands the direction of public affairs. They've understood that it is their imperious duty and their absolute right to render themselves masters of their own destinies by seizing upon the governmental power. We got a revolution, chat. We got a revolution. Now, the Paris Commune was kind of the first proof of concept for Marx of his work. And it lasted, I believe, 72 days off the top of my head, if I remember correctly. You know, it lasted in between 2 and 3 months, if I'm remembering right. So it didn't last super long. See, there's successes and failures we can learn from. Here. Did I just say the car is live? Did I? Où est le banque? I learned that once on a road trip back in the day when you could still learn language from CDs and cassette tapes. Yeah, I listened to that for 3 hours straight trying to learn French. Où est le banque? That's what I remember. Paris Commune, or almost commie summer. Exactly. Vivez le commune. But the working class cannot simply lay hold of the ready-made state machinery and wield it for its purpose. Now, I'm going to take a little pause here. This is the number one most misinterpreted left-com sentence of all time. And I do think this has to do with the literacy crisis, and I'm not saying that to dunk on people. I think that people are really struggling with literacy skills. We know this. People can read words on a page, but they're not able to interpret what they mean. So this is not a departure from anything Marx has said ever, right? The working class cannot simply lay hold of the ready-made state machinery and wield it for its purposes. The key emphasis here is ready-made. Marx is not saying the working class can't just take over the state and then be like, we're doing the state now. That's what the left comms want you to believe. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is you can't lay hold of the ready-made state machinery. And this is something, if you listen to Stalin talk about it, Stalin referenced this extensively when we did our Theory Thursday on that. What he's saying is you, as the working class, need to create your own new government. If you just take hold of the existing bourgeois institutions, those institutions were created to defend the bourgeoisie. They are not going to be applicable to you. You can't just be like, we're in charge of parliament now. It's the people's parliament. It's not going to fucking work because the parliament was not set up for you. The parliament was set up to protect a bunch of rich dudes, right? So you can't just take hold of the army and be like, it's our army now. No, you can't, because the army, the entire structure of it has been corrupted. It is bourgeois army. You need to create your own army, right? So this is what Marx is talking about. And we're going to see throughout the rest of the text, he describes exactly how the Paris Commune did that. They dismantled the existing state and they built their own state that served their needs as workers, rather than relying on the old state institutions that had been created to serve the needs of the bourgeoisie and the ruling class. So this should be common sense, this interpretation. I have never in my life seen people misunderstand this line until like the past year. I do think it has to do with the literacy crisis. This is the only thing I can think about. And I don't mean that as a burn, right? Reading is a skill. You have to keep at it. But just remember, ready-made is here for a reason. If Marx really wanted to say, but you can't just take hold of the state and then wield power through a state apparatus, he would have said that. But he didn't. He said you can't lay hold of the ready-made state machinery for a reason. And that's what he's about to explain. Also why you can't just take a sentence out of context, right? You got to read the whole text. So he goes on to say, the centralized state power, with its ubiquitous organs of standing army, police, bureaucracy, clergy, judicature, organs wrought after the plan of a systematic and hierarchic division of labor, originates from the days of absolute monarchy, serving nascent middle-class society as a mighty weapon in its struggle against feudalism. So what's he saying here? The power that already existed centrally in Paris that controlled all of France, the problem with it isn't that it's a centralized state power. If it was, he would say that. He would say the problem with it is it's too centralized. That's not what he's saying. He's using centralized state power as a descriptor of the bourgeois state apparatus. That doesn't mean it's inherently flawed because it's got a central government. That's just silly. What he's saying is all of these things were created, right, specifically to uphold the hierarchic division of labor. So all of this comes back even from feudalist society. So this is not going to be the government that's going to work for you in a workers' society. He says, still, its development remained clogged by all manner of medieval rubbish. He's saying, the bourgeois revolution didn't even undo enough of this shit left over from feudalism. Seigneurial rights, local privileges, municipal and guild monopolies, and provincial constitutions. The gigantic broom of the French Revolution of the 18th century swept away all these relics of bygone times, thus clearing simultaneously the social soil of its last hindrances to the superstructure of the modern state edifice raised under the First Empire, itself the offspring of the coalition wars of the old semi-feudal Europe against modern France. So he says, its development came from all of this. Sure, the French Revolution swept away all the relics of bygone times, but it still was developed with these things in mind. It still was born from this. And Marx talks about this a lot. When you have a revolution and you build a new society, it's still going to be stamped, right, with markers of what came before. Sorry, fork's mad. During the subsequent regimes, the government placed under parliamentary control, that is, under the direct control of the propertied class, became not only a hotbed of huge national debts and crushing taxes, with its irresistible allurements of place, pelf, and patronage, it became not only the bone of contention between the rival factions and adventurers of the ruling class, but its political character changed simultaneously with the economic changes of society. So what's he saying here is that the government was placed under direct control of people with property, of the bourgeoisie, of the owning class. This was the government. The Parliament of Paris was the government, the parliament of the rich. At the same pace at which the progress of modern industry developed, widened, and intensified the class antagonism between capital and labor, the state power assumed more and more the character of the national power of capital over labor, of a public force organized for social enslavement, of an engine of class despotism. So he's saying even as originally these systems kind of existed to mitigate the conflict or provide a venue for the conflict between different members of the ruling class, as capitalism advanced and the contradictions between the owning class and the workers became more and more extreme, more and more the government became a tool used, right, to push down and oppress the working class in these conflicts. More and more it became a government used to protect and insulate the owning class from the demands and wishes of the workers. And we see that here in the United States where I live. You probably can see the same thing happening historically where you live as well. As the more the workers rise up and ask for more or demand more, the more the owning class's government is going to find new and creative ways to deny them that privilege and that right. After every revolution marking a progressive phase in the class struggle, and again, a progressive phase in the class struggle, the same people who will come out here and call you a stagist for suggesting, as Marx did, that society naturally moves through phases of class struggle, indigenous communism to feudalism, feudalism to capitalism, capitalism to socialism and communism. They will call you insane for suggesting this. And it is true, Marx said, well, maybe you can skip a few stages. I'm not entirely sure. Give it a shot, see how it goes. Anything's possible. He didn't say you had to. But the idea that most countries, most places would be exempt from this is foolish. And also, he acknowledges it is a progressive phase in class struggle. That is why in the Communist Manifesto, in Principles of Communism, the first draft, in everything he writes, the proletarian could not have existed outside of capitalism. The proletarian has not always existed. They came into existence during capitalism. And what is a communist revolution, a worker revolution? It's a proletarian revolution. So a proletarian revolution is born of capitalism, right? Now, what of these places that had revolutions in their feudal stage? What of them, right? That was a surprise. Oh, wow. A lot of peasant revolutions, a lot of feudal revolutions happen. Do these people then get to skip capitalism, or must they first make themselves proletarians? Well, that is the question, right? And there's some question that goes back and forth about this. Stalin wrote about this, Lenin even wrote about this, where it's like, what are we supposed to wait for capitalism to happen before we can have a revolution? No, that's silly. You can have your revolution, certainly. And you can take the power of the state apparatus you've built under the dictatorship of the proletariat and use it to administer the elements of capitalism you need that are beneficial to you and forget the rest. And this is something that they talk about a lot. But this idea that it's not a progressive phase in the class struggle in Marx's mind is simply foolish. He acknowledges it is. The purely repressive character of the state power stands out bolder and bolder relief, right? So the repressive character of state power, does that mean Marx thinks all states are bad? No. But the fact remains that the state exists to repress people. Engels clarified that in the letter to Bebel, right? So the only difference is that in a worker state, the state exists to oppress and repress the rich, the bourgeoisie, the owning class, the people who seek to undo your revolution. There is no world, and Marx says this multiple places, in which a free state exists. The state does not exist to grant you freedoms. It exists to repress and oppress people. The only question is who is wielding the power and who is being oppressed. And that is what the dictatorship of the proletariat is all about. Wielding the power of the state to oppress the people who seek to harm you, the owning class, the bourgeoisie. So the Revolution of 1830, resulting in the transfer of government from the landlords to capitalists, transferred it from the more remote to the more direct antagonists of the working man. The bourgeois Republicans, who in the name of the February Revolution took the state power, used it for the June 1848 massacres in order to convince the working class that social republic means the Republican trusting their social subjection, and in order to convince the royalist bulk of the bourgeois and landlord class they might safely leave the cares and emoluments of government to the bourgeois Republicans. However, after their one heroic exploit of June, the bourgeois Republicans had, from the front, to fall back to the rear of the Party of Order, a combination formed by the rival fractions and factions of the appropriating class. The proper form of their joint stock government was the parliamentary republic, with Bonaparte for its president. Theirs was a regime of avowed class terrorism and deliberate insult towards the vile multitude, right? And he's saying, they call it the vile multitude. They don't give a fuck about you. They hate the masses, right? They want to do class terrorism against you. They might fight with each other. They might have different ideas about how to do it. But at the end of the day, they will always come together, the rich, under this one shared goal. If the parliamentary republic, as M. Thiers said, divided them, the different fractions of the ruling class, least, it opened an abyss between that class and the whole body of society outside of their spare ranks. The restraints by which their own divisions had formed under regimes still checked the state power were removed by their union, and in view of the threatening upheaval of the proletariat, they now used that state power mercilessly and ostentatiously as the national war engine of capital against labor. They might fight with each other, but at the end of the day, it's a one big club and you're not in it. They're using all this, ultimately, at the end of the day, to oppress you, right? In their uninterrupted crusade against the producing masses, they were, however, bound not only to invest the executive with continually increased powers of repression, but at the same time to divest their own parliamentary stronghold, the National Assembly, one by one, of all its own means of defense against the executive. The executive, in the person of Louis Bonaparte, turned them out. The natural offspring of the Party of Order Republic was the Second Empire. The empire with the coup d'etat for its birth certificate, universal suffrage for its sanction, and the sword for its scepter professed to rest upon the peasantry, the large mass of producers not directly involved in the struggle of capital and labor. It professed to save the working class by breaking down parliamentarism, and with it the undisguised subserviency of government to the propertied classes. It professed to save propertied classes by upholding their economic supremacy over the working class, and finally it professed to unite all classes by reviving for all the chimera of national glory. In reality, it was the only form of government possible at a time when the bourgeoisie had already lost, and the working class had not yet acquired the faculty of ruling the nation. It was acclaimed throughout the world as a savior of society. Under its sway, bourgeois society, freed from political cares, attained a development unexpected even by itself. Its industry and commerce expanded to colossal dimensions. Financial swindling celebrated cosmopolitan orgies. The misery of the masses was set off by a shameless display of gorgeous, meretricious, and debased luxury. The state power apparently soaring high above society in the very hotbed of all of its corruptions. Its own rottenness and the rottenness of the society it had saved were laid bare by the bayonet of Prussia, herself eagerly bent upon transferring the supreme seat of that regime from Paris to Berlin. Imperialism is, at the same time, the most prostitute and the ultimate form of state power, which nascent middle-class society had commenced to elaborate as a means of its own emancipation from feudalism, and which full-grown bourgeois society had finally transformed into a means for the enslavement of labor by capital. The direct antithesis to the empire was the Commune. The cry of social republic, with which the February Revolution was ushered in by the Paris proletariat, did but express a vague aspiration after a republic that was not only to supersede the monarchical form of class rule, but class rule itself. The Commune was the positive form of that republic. Paris, the central seat of the old governmental power, and at the same time the social stronghold of the French working class, had risen in arms against the attempt of Thiers and the rurals to restore and perpetuate that old governmental power bequeathed to them by empire. Paris could resist only because, in consequence of the siege, it had gotten rid of the army and replaced it with the National Guard, the bulk of which consisted of working men. This fact was now to be transformed into an institution. The first decree of the Commune, therefore, was the suppression of the standing army and the substitution for it of the armed people. Now, what is Marx talking about here? Marx is talking about the very first way that they undid, the ready-made state machinery and created a new state apparatus, right? That's what he's talking about here. They didn't just use the old standing army. They got rid of it. And they were like, we have our own army now, right? we have the armed people. The Commune was formed of the municipal councillors chosen by universal suffrage in the various wards of the town, responsible and revocable at short terms. The majority of its members were naturally working men, or acknowledged representatives of the working class. The Commune was to be a working, not a parliamentary, body, executive and legislative at the same time. So what is he talking about here? Now he's talking about how their new government was formed. Their new government's not top down, it's bottom up. It's a very standard Marxist-Leninist organizational form also. This is the exact same form they have in Cuba. It's the exact same form they have in China. This is very, very standard. If you're in a Marxist-Leninist org, this is probably how your org is structured. Delegate model, right? So the smallest level, you are electing who represents you, right? That's your delegate. They go and they meet with the other delegates of other small levels. They choose amongst themselves delegates to go up. And this is how it goes until you reach the top. This is a very standard Marxist model. And very, very much what they do, certainly in Cuba, definitely in China, etc. Instead of continuing to be the agent of the central government, the police was at once stripped of its political attributes and turned into the responsible and at all times revocable agent of the Commune. So were the officials of all other branches of the administration. From the members of the Commune downwards, the public service had to be done at a workman's wage. The vested interest in the representation allowances of the high dignitaries of state disappeared, along with the high dignitaries themselves. Public functions ceased to be the private property of the tools of the central government. Not only municipal administration, but the whole initiative hitherto exercised by the state was laid into the hands of the Commune. Does it say there was no longer the initiatives that had been exercised by the state? No. The initiatives that had been exercised by the state were now made the responsibility of the Commune. And also the workman's wage. This is just interesting. In Cuba, you don't earn a wage, right, for your work in the government. So they don't even have the workman's wage for that. But many places they do. You just earn a very, very normal pay. Being in the government is no longer this illustrious position. It's a service. It's a public service. It's a job. You're a worker with a job. And that's what they're talking about here. Having once got rid of the standing army and the police, the physical force elements of the old government, the Commune was anxious to break the spiritual force of repression. And this doesn't mean, again, that they just didn't have an army and a police. They had their own. They built their own new army and police. The parson power by the disestablishment and disendowment of all churches and proprietary bodies. And again, church, remember back at this time, the church is very heavily tied to the state. It's a tool of state power apparatus of the bourgeois government, right? The priests were sent back to the recesses of private life, there to feed upon the alms of the faithful in imitation of their predecessors, the apostles. The whole of the educational institutions were opened to the people gratuitously, and at the same time cleared of all interference of church and state. Thus, not only was education made accessible to all, but science itself freed from the fetters which class prejudice and governmental force had imposed upon it. They're talking again about the church and the state working together in tandem to oppress the people. The judicial functionaries were to be divested of the sham independence which had served to mask their abject subserviency to all succeeding governments, to which in turn they had taken and broken the oaths of allegiance. Like the rest of the public servants, magistrates and judges were to be elective, responsible, and revocable. And this is something, even the DPRK, everybody who's elected is revocable, and it's written in their constitution, right? The assembly can revoke people from their positions. The Paris Commune was, of course, to serve as a model to all of the great industrial centers of France. The communal regime, once established in Paris and the secondary centers, the old centralized government would be in the provinces too, have to give way to the self-government of the producers. Would in the provinces too have to give way to the self-government of the producers. Now, this is another text that is often misinterpreted by left comms, right? What they're saying is they would have in different provinces outside of Paris. Also, they would have their elections there. They would elect the people that represented them. And then those people would have a delegate model that went up to the national level, which we'll see talked about more. Often when I talk to left comms, I ask them how they're defining centralized and decentralized power structures. And it's very curious because there's like a mythology of centralized power in certain left-wing spaces. And you really have to break through the mythology, like the mythology of the word dictator. What does it mean to you? What do you mean when you say that? Free speech. What does that mean to you? What is free speech? All these words we use that are actually quite vague, that it feels common sense for us to know and understand. But the power of these words relies in how vague they are. They're tools of political confusion, of murkiness, right? So what does it mean to have a centralized government? So when Marx is saying the old centralized government would in the provinces too have to give way to the self-government of the producers, he's just describing a bottom-up organizational system for the government, not a top-down one. He's not saying The rich elect the government in Paris and then they go out and they dictate to the smaller areas. No, he's describing the exact same model Marxist-Leninists use today. The small areas elect their representatives and they serve as a delegate that then goes up. And so you have a bottom-up model of government. This is what he's describing them establishing in Paris. This is exactly what they do in Cuba. This is exactly what they do in China. Again, this is very, very normal. So this idea of centralized government, a lot of people today will be like, I don't know, the federal government exists or does things. That is not how they are using the term centralized government. What they're talking about in this situation is a top-down model rather than a bottom-up model, right? So in a rough sketch of national organization, and he's going to talk about this in more detail, we're getting into this, which the Commune had no time to develop, it states clearly that the Commune was to be the political form of even the smallest country hamlet, and that in the rural districts, the standing army was to be replaced by a national militia with an extremely short term of service. The rural communities of every district were to administer their common affairs by an assembly of delegates to the central town. The delegate model is the standard Marxist-Leninist model. And these district assemblies were again to send deputies to the national delegation in Paris. So what's he describing, right? Rural communities, you administer your shit. Then you elect a delegate. The delegate goes up, what? To go to the central town. Right? The town kind of near like a county level or something like that. It's maybe an easy way to think of it if you're American. And all of those people get together and then they're electing their delegates to go up to the next highest branch of government all the way up until you get to the national level. That's what he's describing. He's not saying there's no national government or there's limited national government. No, he's not describing that at all. He's describing a bottom-up organizational model of government that all Marxists today follow. All of these actually existing socialist places today follow this model, right? Contrary to what capitalists try to tell you. This is exactly the model they will explain to you that their governments have. The idea that rural communities in China, in the DPRK, and Cuba aren't having elections is frankly insane. That's just made up. So this is a system happening. And if you were in a Marxist-Leninist org, this is probably how your elections work as well. Each delegate at any time is revocable and bound by formal instructions of his constituents. The few but important functions which would still remain for a central government were not to be suppressed, as has been intentionally misstated, but were to be discharged by communal and thereafter responsible agents. So this is the line that really just undoes everything these people think. These people who misinterpret the front line of this, right? The people who are like, the working class cannot simply lay hold of the ready-made state machinery wielded for its purpose. The people who read that and think that that means that there's no overarching state apparatus anymore or that it's significantly compromised and suppressed. Marx debunks that here in the text. He says, the few but important functions which would still remain for a central government are not going to be suppressed, as people are intentionally misstating, right? They're still happening. They are still happening from this delegate model. So this is the first one that always kills me. I'm like, bro, are you intentionally misstating? Are you intentionally claiming that the central government's functions are going to be suppressed? Is that you? Was he talking about you? I think he was talking about you. And this is what I mean where I'm like, there's no way these people are reading these texts, right? So he's not saying there's no fucking central government or you suppress the central government. He's like, no, there's still important functions for them to serve. A lot of the shit can be handled better at a local level. I mean, not all of it. And you still need your central government for that, and it should not be suppressed. So, the unity of the nation was not to be broken. Not to be that decentralized, right? But on the contrary, to be organized by communal constitution and to become a reality by the destruction of the state power which claimed to be the embodiment of that unity, independent of and superior to the nation itself, from which it was but a parasitic excrescence. So, what does he really say here? What does he say? He says, yeah, we're destroying a state power. We're not destroying all state power. He says we're destroying the state power that claimed to be the embodiment of the unity of the nation, but was not. It was not unifying the nation. That's not what it was doing. You know, in the capitalist hands, the existence of a centralized government is not to unite the people. It might claim that, but it's not. Right? It's to make themselves superior to the people. Now, though, we have the opportunity to form a state government that actually is concerned with the unity of the nation. And that's what's going to happen. That's what we're going to see happening. while the merely repressive organs of old governmental power were to be amputated, right? Anything that existed before in the government that was there just so rich people could oppress you, fuck that. We're not doing that anymore. We're getting rid of that. But its legitimate functions were to be wrested from an authority usurping preeminence over society itself and restored to the responsible agents of society. Right? The old governmental powers' legitimate functions were to be taken from the bourgeoisie and given to the working class. That's who's in charge of it now. This is exactly, like verbatim, word for word, what he talks about in the Communist Manifesto. We'll find the quote. When he says, here, this is from the manifesto, the proletariat will use its political supremacy to wrest by degrees all capital from the bourgeoisie, to centralize all instruments of production in the hands of the state, i.e. of the proletariat organized as the ruling class, and to increase the total of productive forces as rapidly as possible. Right? This is the goal of the dictatorship of the proletariat. So when he says this, he's even using the same language. He's like, what did they do? They were wresting the authority from the capitalists, from the bourgeoisie, and they were putting it in their hands, in their power of the state, which was at that time the proletariat organized as the ruling class. This new state, the new people coming here. We have a really poop-themed chat today. Instead of deciding once in 3 or 6 years which member of the ruling class was to misrepresent the people in parliament, instead of your fucking petty, weird bourgeois elections that don't do shit, universal suffrage was to serve the people, constituted in communes, as individual suffrage serves every other employer in the search for the workmen and the managers of his business. Now, the workers have the right to choose who will represent them. Everybody will get to vote, right? On things. And it is well known that companies, like individuals in matters of real business, generally know how to put the right man in the right place, and if they for once make a mistake, to redress it promptly. On the other hand, nothing could be more foreign to the spirit of the Commune than to supersede universal suffrage by hierarchical investiture. It is generally the fate of completely new historical creations to be mistaken for the counterparts of older and even defunct forms of social life, to which they may bear a certain likeness. Thus, this new commune, which breaks with the modern state power, has been mistaken for a reproduction of the medieval communes, which first preceded and afterwards became the substratum of that very state power. Right? So, what does Marx say here? He reaffirms the need to have a centralized state apparatus. The communal constitution has been mistaken for an attempt to break up into the federation of small states, as dreamt of by Montesquieu and the Girondins, that unity of great nations, which, if originally brought about by political force, has now become a powerful coefficient of social production. So he's saying, you might think this is an attempt to break up great nations into smaller decentralized states. But he's like, that's not what it is. That's not what's going on here. The antagonism of the commune against the state power has been mistaken for an exaggerated form of the ancient struggle against over-centralization. You see what I'm talking about? These people aren't fucking reading this text. He's like, some of you ding-dongs might mistake this for a struggle against centralization. It's not. And guess what? Those ding-dongs today are saying, read the Paris Commune, as though it proves the literal opposite of what it proves. Right? So, peculiar historical circumstances may have prevented the classical development, as in France, of the bourgeois form of government, and may have allowed, as in England, to complete the great central state organs by corrupt vestries, jobbing councillors, and ferocious poor law guardians in the towns, and virtually hereditary magistrates in the counties. The communal constitution would have restored to the social body all the forces hitherto absorbed by the state parasite feeding upon and clogging the free movement of society. By this one act, it would have initiated the regeneration of France. The provincial French middle class saw in the Commune an attempt to restore the sway their order had held over the country under Louis Philippe. Philippe, how do you guys fucking pronounce it? You guys Europeans? Philippe. I'm thinking of this like actor from the 90s, Ryan Philippe is how we called him, but maybe that's just a Hollywood thing. And which under Louis Napoleon was supplanted by the pretended rule of the country over towns. In reality, the communal constitution brought the rural producers under the intellectual lead of the central towns of their districts, and there secured to them, in the working men, the natural trustees of their interests. He's just saying they built their own government for the working class, man. They were calling the shots, not the rich. This was the dictatorship of the proletariat, right? The very existence of the commune involved, as a matter of course, local municipal liberty, but no longer as a check upon the now superseded state power. It could only enter into the head of a Bismarck who, when not engaged on his intrigues of blood and iron, always likes to resume his old trade, so befitting his mental caliber of contributor to the Berlin Punch. It could only enter into such a head to ascribe to the Paris Commune aspirations after the caricature of the old French municipal organization of 1791, the Prussian municipal constitution, which degrades the town governments to mere secondary wheels in the police machinery of the Prussian state. The Commune made that catchword of bourgeois revolution, cheap government, a reality by destroying the two greatest sources of expenditure, the standing army and state functionarism. Its very existence presupposed the non-existence of monarchy, which in Europe at least is the normal encumbrance and indispensable cloak of class rule. It supplied the republic with the basis of really democratic institutions. But neither cheap government nor the true republic was its ultimate aim. They were its mere concomitants. The multiplicity of interpretations to which the Commune has been subjected, and the multiplicity of interests which construed it in their favor, show that it was a thoroughly expansive political form, while all the previous form of government has been emphatically repressive. Its true secret was this. It was essentially a working-class government, the product of a struggle against the producing against the appropriating class. The political form, at last, discovered under which to work out the economical emancipation of labor. So he sees the true secret of the Paris Commune is that it was a working class revolution that led to a dictatorship of the proletariat where the workers established their own government. Right? The responsible agents of society could be read as an elite of some kind, Malraux says, meritocratically, technocratically. I think that's just a general catch-all. Marx writes like this. Yeah, he's a wordy bitch. He's talking about the people, the democratically elected members of the working class who were chosen, right, in the smaller areas by their neighbors, by people. Philippe. You guys are debating it for me, thank you. Except on this last condition, the communal constitution would have been an impossibility and a delusion. The political rule of the producer cannot coexist with the perpetuation of his social slavery. The commune was therefore to serve as a lever for uprooting the economical foundation upon which rests the existence of classes, and therefore of class rule. With labor emancipated, every man becomes a working man, and productive labor ceases to be a class attribute. It is a strange fact. In spite of all the tall talk and all the immense literature for the last 60 years about emancipation and labor, no sooner do the working men anywhere take the subject into their own hands with a will than uprises at once all the apologetic phraseology of the mouthpieces of present society with its two poles of capital and wage slavery. The landlord now is but the sleeping partner of the capitalist. As if the capitalist society was still in its purest state of virgin innocence, with its antagonism still undeveloped, with its delusion still unexploded, with its prostitute realities not yet laid bare. The commune, they exclaim, intends to abolish property, the basis of all civilization. And Marx is like, oh, like we haven't seen what privatized property fucking does? You can't act like we haven't seen it, bro. How are we supposed to be mad at that? Oh no, they're going to abolish the thing we fucking have evidence of greatly oppressing and harming like everyone in society? Do you think we're fucking stupid? That's literally what Marx is saying here, right? Malraux, I don't like the existence of authority. I refuse to read anything Engels ever wrote. We're reading the Paris Commune, welcome. Yes, gentlemen, the commune intended to abolish that class property which makes the labor of the many the wealth of the few. He's like, yeah, oh yeah, we're taking it. Fuck you. It aimed at the expropriation of the expropriators. And this is when we talk about what is the role of the state. The state does not exist to grant you freedom. The state exists to oppress your enemies. And as long as you, the working class, have enemies in the ruling class who seek to expropriate from you, to oppress you, to harm you, well, you're going to need a state because you need to repress those people. It wanted to make individual property a truth by transforming the means of production, land, and capital, now chiefly the means of enslaving and exploiting labor, into mere instruments of free and associated labor. But this is communism. Impossible communism. Why, those members of the ruling class who are intelligent enough to perceive the impossibility of continuing the present system, and there are many, have become the obtrusive and full-mouthed apostles of cooperative production. If cooperative production is not to remain a sham and a snare, if it is to supersede the capitalist system, if united cooperative societies are to regulate national production upon common plan, thus taking it under their own control, and putting an end to the constant anarchy and periodical convulsions which are the fatality of capitalist production, what else, gentlemen, would it be but communism? Possible communism. The working class did not expect miracles from the commune. Now, this is the second part that I'm always like, the left comms are expecting miracles of communists, of communism. They have no ready-to-made utopias to introduce, in a phrase that's French that I don't understand. They know that in order to work out their own emancipation, and along with it the higher form to which present society is irresistibly tending by its own economical agencies, they will have to pass through long struggles, through a series of historic processes. Oh my God, that sounds like stagism. Yeah, they're going to have to pass through some shit. Transforming circumstances and men. The working class, Marx says, is supposed to expect this is not instant. This takes time. It will be a struggle, and you will have to pass through long struggles, through a series of historic processes, right? They have no ideals to realize, but to set free the elements of the new society with which old collapsing bourgeois society itself is pregnant. And the full consciousness of their historic mission, and with a heroic resolve to act up to it, the working class can afford to smile at the coarse invective of the gentleman's gentleman with pen and inkhorn, and the didactic patronage of well-wishing bourgeois doctrinaires, pouring forth their ignorant platitudes and sectarian crotchets in the oracular tone of scientific infallibility. When the Paris Commune took the management of the revolution in its own hands, when plain working men, for the first time, dared to infringe upon the governmental privilege of their natural superiors, and, under circumstances of unexampled difficulty, performed it at salaries the highest of which barely amounted to 1/5 of what, according to high scientific authority, is the minimum required for a secretary to a certain metropolitan school board, the old world writhed in convulsions of rage at the sight of the red flag, the symbol of the Republic of Labor, floating over the Hotel de Ville. We say Ville. We call that the Hotel de Ville. I don't think that's how you guys pronounce it. So, yeah, this is, what Marx is talking about here is it actually goes against more capitalists, what capitalists say. Who would do that job for that little? Who would be a doctor for that little pay? Cuba, meanwhile, has the most doctors per capita out of anywhere on the planet, right? And this is what Marx is laughing at here. He's like, oh, they were saying, oh, that nobody would be the secretary of the school board of Paris for such low wages. You have to pay them so much money to get them to do that hard task. And he's like, well, look, regular working men are now doing it for 1/5 of what you said that guy was going to do it for. Turns out, people actually will take it upon themselves to be responsible for controlling their society and guiding their society when they understand they actually have that control, right? So he's like, people will work. People like to work. People will work for whatever makes sense. They don't need these high salaries, this esteemed status in society to do government work. That's not reality. That's what the rich have tried to convince you is normal because they would like to make money, right? And yet this was the first revolution in which the working class was openly acknowledged as the only class capable of social initiative, even by the great bulk of the Paris middle class, shopkeepers, tradesmen, merchants, the wealthy capitalists alone excepted. The Commune had saved them by a sagacious settlement of that ever-recurring cause of dispute among the middle class themselves, the debtor and creditor accounts. The same portion of the middle class, after they had assisted in putting down the working men's insurrection of June of 1848, had been at once ceremoniously sacrificed to their creditors by the then Constituent Assembly. I see what's interesting here as we talk about the petite bourgeoisie, right? Some of them might think they have aspirations of being like the rich. You know, you're not going to be the rich, babe. The rich are the people in the banks that are loaning you money, right? You're not the rich. You're in debt and fucked over, and your best chance of survival is aligning yourself with the working class. Ironically, you think that your ultimate end goal in life is to be the oppressor of the working class. Joke's on you, the working class is going to liberate you too, right? And this is why we see the issue of the petite bourgeoisie is so interesting, because some people do realize that. Most people don't, but some of them do. And Marx is like, they came to realize that with the issue of the Paris Commune. The only people who did not support the Paris Commune were the extremely rich. And why? Because at the end of the day, the middle class is in debt to the owning class. They're in debt to the banks. And they know it. And the owning class knows it. And the banks know it. Zay's up against the mic. She's about to step on the mic cord. Oh. Where are you going? Small captain. She's looking. She's thinking about it. Do you see her ear? Ear in frame. Do you want to come right here? Come here. Good Kit. Good girl. Yes. Oh, you're so stretchy. Yeah. Oh, good job. That's a good Kit. Here, do you want to lay on this? I know you like to lay on a sideways pillow. Yeah, I know you like that. What about here? No? Okay. All right. She leaving. Sorry. Okay. But this was not their only motive for now rallying around the working class. They felt there was but one alternative, the commune or the empire, under whatever name it might appear. The empire had ruined them economically by the havoc it made of public wealth, by the wholesale financial swindling it fostered, by the props it lent to the artificially accelerated centralization of capital, and the concomitant expropriation of their own ranks. Capitalism will eat the middle class in the end. The tendency towards monopoly means that you cannot exist as petite bourgeoisie for long. They'll come for you too. My ex, actually, who passed away, who was the founder and owner of Lip Service, the clothing company, he would talk about this all the time. He would really, and he's actually the person who taught me a lot of how our company runs. He did profit sharing programs at his company, and all these really interesting programs to mitigate the owner-worker antagonisms. And he talked about this a lot. But it was still a small business, right? So he would always make a joke about justice for the middleman, bring back the middleman, save the middleman. And he was very self-aware about it in a very, very funny way. But he would talk about how he would just watch bigger companies eat up all of the mom and pop retailers that he used to sell to for years and years and years, especially starting in the 80s when it started to accelerate the centralization of capital. And this was a very interesting thing for him to watch happen around him, right? It's like you see your writing on the wall, right? Yeah, that was my partner who died. Yeah, he was the founder of Lip Service. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it had suppressed them politically. It had shocked them morally by its orgies. It had insulted their Voltaireanism by handing over the education of their children to the frères ignorantins. It had revolted their national feeling as Frenchmen by precipitating them headlong into a war, which left only one equivalent for the ruins it made, the disappearance of the empire. In fact, after the exodus from Paris of the high Bonapartist and capitalist Bohème, Bohemian, right? The true middle-class party of order came out of the shape of the Union Républicaine. This is a lot of French, I'm so sorry. Enrolling themselves under the colors of the Commune and defending it against the willful misconstructions of Thiers. Well, the gratitude of this great body of the middle class will stand the present severe trial. Time must show. The Commune was perfectly right in telling the peasants that its victory was their only hope. Of all the lies hatched at Versailles and re-echoed by the glorious European penny-a-liner, one of the most tremendous was that the rurals represented the French peasantry. Think only of the love of the French peasant for the men to whom, after 1815, he had to pay the milliard indemnity. In the eyes of the French peasant, the very existence of a great landed proprietor is in itself an encroachment of his conquest of 1789. The bourgeois in 1848 had hardened his plot of land with the additional tax of 45 cents in the franc. But then he did so in the name of the revolution. Well, now he had fomented a civil war against revolution to shift onto the peasants' shoulders the chief load of the 5 milliards of indemnity to be paid to the Prussian. The Commune, on the other hand, in one of its first proclamations, declared that the true originators of the war would be made to pay its cost. The Commune would have delivered the peasant of the blood money, the blood tax rather, would have given him a cheap government, transformed his present bloodsuckers, the notary, advocate, executor, and other judicial vampires, into salaried communal agents, elected by and responsible to himself. It would have freed him of the tyranny of the garde champêtre. Why is there so much French? I've never read this out loud, only to myself. And the prefect would have put enlightenment by the schoolmaster in the place of stultification by the priest. And the French peasant is, above all, a man of reckoning. He would find it extremely reasonable that the pay of the priest, instead of being extorted by the tax gatherer, should only depend upon the spontaneous action of the parishioner's religious instinct. Such were the great immediate boons which the rule of the commune, and that rule of all, alone held out to the French peasantry. It is therefore quite superfluous here to expatiate upon the more complicated but vital problems which the commune alone was able and at the same time compelled to solve in favor of the peasant. Hypothecary debt, lying like an incubus upon his parcel of soil, the rural proletariat daily growing upon it, his expropriation from it enforced at a more and more rapid rate by the very development of modern agriculture and the competition of capitalist farming. The French peasant had elected Louis Bonaparte president of the Republic, but the party of order created the empire. What the French peasant really wants, he commenced to show in 1849-1850 by opposing his mayor to the government's prefect, his schoolmaster to the government's priest, and himself to the government's gendarme. Why have I never said these words out loud? Sorry. Why is there so much French in the Paris colony? I hate it. You know what? Since I am French, the way I pronounce it just is correct. And if you say anything to me suggesting otherwise, you're wrong. And speaking over French people, of which I am the main mouthpiece as a member of the great French diaspora. Why is there French? Listen to French voices. Gendarme, gendarme. All right. I don't even know where I left off because I was crying so much. Here we go. All the laws made by the Party of Order in January and February 1850 were avowed measures of repression against the peasant. The peasant was a Bonapartist because of the Great Revolution, with all its benefits to him, in his eyes, personified in Napoleon. This delusion, rapidly breaking down under the Second Empire, and in its very nature hostile to the rurals, this prejudice of the past, how could it have withstood the appeal of the commune to the living interests and urgent wants of the peasantry? The rurals, this was in fact the chief apprehension, knew that 3 months' free communication of communal Paris with the provinces would bring about a general rising of the peasants, and hence their anxiety to establish a police blockade around Paris so as to stop the spread of the rinderpest, cattle pest, contagious disease, it says. If the commune was thus the true representative of all the healthy elements of French society, and therefore the truly national government, it was at the same time as a working man's government, as the bold champion of the emancipation of labor, emphatically international. Within sight of that Prussian army that had annexed to Germany 2 French provinces, the commune annexed to France the working people all over the world. Genre d'arme. Genre d'arme. So he's talking about how this working class revolution is very appealing to the peasants as well. How the rich had tried to convince the peasants that subverting them would save them. Kind of reminds me of some elements of the poor here being convinced, that Donald Trump would save them or whatever, right? And he's like, well, no, the commune was their greatest chance at salvation. The peasant class is going to be freed by a worker revolution as well. It's their only chance for survival because they, too, are being exploited by the capitalist farmers, by the landowners, by, these forces working together, right? Landlords and capitalists, one and the same. Because this is what he's talking about, really. The Paris Commune failed, so French is a dead language. I agree. And, of course, he's talking about the spirit of internationalism, which is very important. The Second Empire had been the jubilee of cosmopolitan blacklegism, the rakes of all countries pushing in at its call for a share in its orgies and in the plunder of the French people. Even at this moment, the right hand of Thiers is Ganesco, the foul Wallachian, and his left hand is Markovsky, the Russian spy. The commune admitted all foreigners to the honor of dying for an immortal cause. Between the foreign war, lost by their treason, and the civil war, fomented by their conspiracy with the foreign invaders, later, the bourgeoisie had found the time to display their patriotism by organizing police hunts upon the Germans in France. The Commune made a German working man, Leo Frankel, its Minister of Labor. The bourgeoisie, the Second Empire, had continually deluded Poland by loud professions of sympathy, while in reality betraying her to and doing the dirty work of Russia. The Commune honored the heroic sons of Poland by placing them at the head of the defenders of Paris. So what is he saying? The bourgeoisie is not a tool to defend any ethnic minority. They don't care. They will turn on anybody for a profit. But he says the working men are international. Ethnic minorities existing within Paris were given positions of power by the working men because they viewed them as one and the same. They were bound by being workers, right? And to broadly mark the new era of history, it was conscious of initiating under the eyes of the conquering Prussians on one side and the Bonapartist army led by Bonapartist generals on the other. The Commune pulled down that colossal symbol of martial glory, the Vendome column. The great social measure of the Commune was its own working existence. Its special measures could betoken the tendency of a government by the people, of the people by the people. Such were the abolition of the night work of journeyman bakers, the prohibition under penalty of the employer's practice to reduce wages by levying upon the workplace fines under manifold pretexts, a process in which the employer combines his own person the parts of legislator, judge, and executor, and filches the money to boot. Another measure of this class was the surrender to associations of workmen, under reserve of compensation, of all closed workshops and factories, no matter whether the respective capitalists had absconded or preferred to strike work. The financial measures of the Commune, remarkable for their sagacity and moderation, could only be such as were compatible with the state of a besieged town. Considering the colossal robberies committed upon the city of Paris by the great financial companies and contractors under the protection of Haussmann, the Commune would have had an incomparably better title to confiscate their property than Louis Napoleon had against the Orleans family. The Hohenzollern and the English oligarchs, both who have derived a great deal of their estates from church plunders, were, of course, greatly shocked at the Commune clearing but 8,000 unit of measurement out of secularization. While the Versailles government, as soon as it had recovered some spirit and strength, used the most violent means against the Commune. While it put down the free expression of opinion all over France, even to the forbidding of meetings and delegates from large towns, while it subjected Versailles and the rest of France to an espionage far surpassing that of the Second Empire, while it burned by its... You taught me how to say it and I forgot. Francs! 8,000 francs! I think you're right. Inquisitors, all papers printed in Paris, and sifted all correspondence from and to Paris, while in the National Assembly the most timid attempts to put in a word for Paris were howled down in a manner unknown even to the Chamber of 1816. With the savage warfare of Versailles outside, and its attempts at corruption and conspiracy inside Paris, would the Commune not have shamefully betrayed its trust by affecting to keep all the decencies and appearances of liberalism as in a time of profound peace? Right? And what's he saying here? We are under attack. You are under attack. They're not going to be able to be all fucking nice and shiny and shit like when you're in a time of peace. To expect a worker state under siege, under attack, to be as able to produce kind civil liberties and pleasantries as anything in a time of peace is frankly unrealistic. And this is what he's saying. Right? They are under fucking attack, right? Like this is what they're doing here. And this is something we still run into today. People look at these worker governments under siege, under constant attack from outside forces, and they go, why do they have prisons? Why are there prisons like this? Why are they locking up political enemies? I don't get it. Why do they have a nuclear weapon? They are under fucking attack. Like, what are you talking about? Let them live. Like, Jesus. But this is, gendarme. I'm never going to learn French. It's an act of rebellion. I'm never going to learn French. You can't make me. But this is what he's talking about. Had the government of the Commune been akin to that of Thiers, there would have been no more occasion to suppress party of order papers at Paris than there was to suppress communal papers at Versailles. It was irritating indeed to the rurals that at the very same time they declared the return to the church to be the only means of salvation for France, the infidel Commune unearthed the peculiar mysteries of the Picpus nunnery and of the Church of St. Laurent. It was a satire upon Thiers that while he showered grand crosses upon the Bonapartist generals in acknowledgement of their mastery in losing battles, shots fired, signing capitulations and turning cigarettes at Wilhelmshow, the Commune dismissed and arrested its generals whenever they were suspected of neglecting their duties. He's like, the Commune, we were fucking, look at what we were doing. Look at what the communists were doing, right? You're fucking off. You're shirking your duties. Get out of here. No, you're dismissed. You're doing something that harms the people? You're arrested. He's like, look at the pathetic fucking militaries of the rich. Look at the United States, for example, commending ourselves, patting ourselves on the back for losing wars. Look at this loser-ass energy, right? This is not what they're doing in the Commune. The expulsion from and arrest by the Commune of one of its members, who had slipped under a false name and had undergone at Lyons 6 days imprisonment for bankruptcy, was it not a deliberate insult hurled at the forger, Jules Favre, then still the foreign minister of France, still selling France to Bismarck and still dictating his orders to that paragon government of Belgium? But indeed, the Commune did not pretend infallibility. The invariable attribute of all governments of the old stamp. It published its doings and sayings. It initiated the public in all of its shortcomings. So he's like, look, are you going to make mistakes? Are you going to be a little heavy-handed sometimes? Yeah, it's going to happen. Why? Because you're not fucking perfect. Because you're people doing your best. It's going to happen. But what you can do is be transparent, be accountable, be like, yeah, that was maybe we went after the wrong. Maybe that guy wasn't really to blame there, right? Oh, great. Newsom 2028. Yes. In every revolution, there intrude at the sides of the true agents men of different stamp. Some of them survivors of and devotees to past revolutions, without insight into the present movement, but preserving popular influence by their known honesty and courage, or by the sheer force of tradition. So he's like, look, you're going to have a revolution. Not every member of the working class is sufficiently class conscious. Some people, they're not super studied. They don't have it quite figured out. But they're of great use in mobilizing the people and inspiring the people. People trust them. You want them on your side, even if they are imperfect, even if they are not studied. Others are mere brawlers who, by dint of repeating year after year the same set of stereotyped declarations against the government of the day, have sneaked into the reputation of revolutionists of the First War. Sometimes you're going to get some guys who just show up because they like to fight. That's bad. They aren't even really on your side, but they showed up and they got in, and now they're just dudes who like to do fucked up shit and fight. That's going to happen sometimes. Not every member of your revolution is going to be perfect. Some of them are well-intentioned, but wrong. Some of them are bad intentions and wrong. This is going to happen. This is normal. And he says, after March 18th, some such men did also turn up, and in some cases contrived to play preeminent parts. Sometimes they end up having some power, like more power than they should. As far as their power went, they hampered the real action of the working class, exactly as men of that sort have hampered the full development of every previous revolution. And when they're in positions of power, it's not good. It doesn't fucking go well. They are an unavoidable evil. With time, they are shaken off. Look, we would have figured out how to deal with these types of people. These opportunists, these weirdos. You didn't have time in the Commune to watch them do that, though. It takes time. Let them cook. Let them get there. They didn't have time. It's, 72 fucking days or whatever, right? Wonderful indeed was the change the Commune had wrought in Paris. No longer any trace of the meretricious Paris of the Second Empire. No longer was Paris the rendezvous of British landlords, Irish absentees, American ex-slaveholders, shoddy men, Russian ex-serf owners, Wallachian boyards. No more corpses at the morgue, no nocturnal burglaries, scarcely any robberies. In fact, for the first time since the days of February 1848, the streets of Paris were safe. And that without any police of any kind. He said transformative justice. Right? Mussolini Lassallean band! We, said a member of the Commune, hear no longer of assassination, theft, personal assault. It seems indeed as if the police had dragged along with it to Versailles all its conservative friends. Turns out when you give people the shit they need, they don't have to resort to crime as much. The cocottes, the prostitutes, had refound the scent of their protectors, the absconding men of family, religion, and above all property. In their stead, the real women of Paris showed again at the surface, heroic, noble, and devoted like the women of antiquity. I'm a little sex worker negative there, maybe, right? Working, thinking, fighting, bleeding Paris, almost forgetful in its incubation of a new society of the cannibals at its gates, radiant in the enthusiasm of its historic initiative. Opposed to this new world at Paris, behold the old world at Versailles, that assembly of the ghouls and all defunct regimes, legitimists and Orleanists, eager to feed upon the carcass of the nation. With the tale of antediluvian republicans sanctioning by their presence in the assembly the slaveholders' rebellion, relying for the maintenance of their parliamentary republic upon the vanity of the senile mountebank at its head, and caricaturing 1789 by holding their ghastly meetings in the Jour des Premiers. That one felt right. There it was, this assembly, the representative of everything dead in France, propped up to the semblance of life by nothing but the sword of the generals of Bonaparte. Paris in all truth, Versailles all lie. And that lie vented through the mouth of Thiers. Jus de pont. Jus de pont. Jus de pont. I feel like I got it. I feel like I fucking really... It felt right in the mouth. It felt right. Probably wasn't right, but it felt right. I feel like that's all that matters. Thiers tells the deputation of the mayors of the... You may rely upon my word, which I have never broken. He tells the assembly itself, it was the most freely elected and most liberal assembly France ever possessed. He tells his motley soldiery that it was the admiration of the world, the finest army France ever possessed. He tells the provinces that the bombardment of Paris by him was a myth. If some cannon shots have been fired, it was not by the deed of the army of Versailles, but of some insurgents trying to make believe that they are fighting, while they dare not show their faces. He again tells the provinces that the artillery of Versailles does not bombard Paris, but only cannonades it. He tells the Archbishop of Paris that the pretend executions and reprisals attributed to the Versailles troops were all moonshine. He tells Paris that he was only anxious to free it from the hideous tyrants who oppress it, and that, in fact, the Paris of the Commune was but a handful of criminals. I like what he's saying here, because he's like, look, the rich people, they lie. The working class, we tell the truth. And what this reminds me of is if you've seen Loyal Citizen Pyongyang, right? The documentary about people from North Korea living in South Korea who don't like South Korea. One of the guys is like, one of the things I learned leaving North Korea, I lived in China, I lived in South Korea, is that North Korea doesn't lie to its people. He says this. He says, they tell the truth, even when it's hard. Even when it's not good news. They tell us the truth. In China, it's fine. In South Korea, though, they lie. They lie to us. And he's like, you can't form a government on lies. The truth will come out and it will fall apart. And that was one of his biggest takeaways, was the capitalists lie to you. They have to lie to control the people, to control the government, because everything is so bad. In communism, they tell you the truth, even if it's not good. And this is what Marx is saying here. He's like, Paris, they're telling the truth. Versailles, they're telling lies. Why? Because they have to. They have to. Their whole shit's a lie. It's all a fucking lie, right? The Paris of Thiers was not the real Paris of the vile multitude, but a phantom Paris. The Paris of the Francfiliers. The Paris of the boulevards. Male and female, the rich, the capitalists, the gilded, the idle Paris, now thronging with its lackeys, its blacklegs, its literary bohemian, academic types. Yeah, intellectuals, and its cocottes at Versailles, Saint Denis, Rueil, and Saint Germain, considering the Civil War but an agreeable diversion, eyeing the battle going on through telescopes, counting the rounds of the cannon, swearing by their own honor and that of their prostitutes, that the performance was far better got up than it used to be at the Porte Saint Martin. The men who fell were really dead. The cries of the wounded were cries in good earnest. And besides, the whole thing was so intensely historical. This is the Paris of Thiers, as the immigration of Cobblins was the France of de Cologne. Okay, there we go. Whatever. This is the section, the Paris Commune. My French skills were impeccable. That's actually how you speak French. I speak French very well, for anybody wondering. If you don't speak French, I did it perfect. And if you do speak French and disagree with me, you are a revisionist and a left-com and Lassallean. So, okay, so that's it. So that's the text. We got through the whole thing, 11:19. We have some time for discussion. So what is Marx talking about with the Paris Commune? There's so much we can learn from this today, right? The first thing that we learn is that, as Stalin said, right, you cannot just take hold of an existing government in a revolution and be like, we did it. You have to make your own government based on the needs of the workers, because the old government existed based on the needs of the owners, and now you have to make your new government based on the needs of the workers. So that's the first thing that he reaffirms. He reaffirms also, you are not supposed to emulate the backwards old communal days of yore. You just don't get it twisted. Don't misrepresent this. You still want a strong nation, right? You want to unify your nation. There still needs to be a centralized government power that is doing things. It's just a bottom-up structure rather than a top-down, right? So this is another thing he says. The other thing he says is, don't expect perfection and don't expect quickness. It's not going to happen quick. It's a long struggle. And in this struggle, you will move through different stages of development. He says this, right? He also says, what? That the ruling class is going to lie. They're going to be full of lies. They're always full of lies about your revolution. The ruling class will always lie about a worker revolution. We see that today. Look at the way the capitalists lie about what happened in the USSR, what happens in the DPRK in China, right? Look at the way they attempt to dismiss it through lies. They don't have the truth at their side, right? But the working class, we have the truth at our side. They are fucking liars. So these are the lessons we learn from the Paris Commune. Nowhere is the lesson learned in the Paris Commune that you must immediately abolish commodity production or your revolution's not valid. Nowhere do we learn that you must immediately do away with money or you didn't actually have a worker revolution. Nowhere here do we learn that centralization is bad and you want this decentralized small government thing. In fact, he says the opposite. And in fact, what he says is that sometimes in your effort to preserve your revolution and defend it, you're actually going to be too aggressive. You're going to crack down a little harder than maybe you should, but that's to be expected because you're under siege. You're under attack by the ruling class, and you just need to be patient and give this new government a chance to work out its kinks and learn, and it will. Give it time, and it will. So this is what we learn. It's very, very fascinating that the left comms in particular look to this text as though it defends anything they believe. This text does not defend any of these ideas. And in fact, this text reaffirms everything we know to be true. Revolutions are imperfect. They are messy. They take time. You can expect that they will need to additionally crack down on enemies of the workers during this time. You can expect this. You can also expect that... Hold on, I just sneezed. Sorry. You can also expect that... it's going to move through different stages. It's not going to happen overnight, right? And you can also expect that a central government will still exist. It needs to. And that the goal is to unite your nation during this time. Notice, he said to unite the nation. It's not anti-nationalist in any capacity either, is it? First time chat, you feel like left comms only want rhetorical perfection. If it's not perfect, they won't support the revolution. They're utopian and idealist. I mean, yeah. And even their version of theoretical perfection does not match Marx. It's not what Marx's idea of theoretical perfection even would be, right? Marx denounced the idea of perfection. There is no perfection. But even if he were, the closest approximations he got to theoretical perfection still do not match up with what these left comms are saying here, right? Malrich, if you consider my unique wrong interpretation is more interesting and therefore more correct. Unironically what they're doing. Very, very interesting. So Marx has been clear, explicitly clear, that there's going to be a dictatorship of the proletariat and it will still be stamped with markers of the last society that came before it. That it won't be perfect. That it will be messy. That it will be slow. But you got to give people time to let things cook. See what they come up with. See what they do. Right? See what they're able to do. So that is that. Now, we got 30 minutes left to chat. We have some options. We could do a brief skim of Gotha, which came in second. Gotha program. Or we could do map. I'm going to do a little poll really fast for everybody. And we'll vote. I'm going to put up a 1-minute poll starting now. Refresh, vote. Gotha. Vote in the poll. Refresh if you don't see it. And, you'll see it there. I'll pull it up just in case. Gotha program. Oh, it's 50-50 chat. Get your votes in. Low voter turnout in the poll. Only 34 people? You should be ashamed of yourselves. You should be ashamed. Oh, that's still even. It's still 50-50. Wow. We always do math. That's true. We always do math. Map. Gotha scheme. It is through Thursday. I think we would do part 4. The rest is just him clowning on LaSalle for all sorts of shit. He's just like, okay, go to skim 1. Okay, we'll do it. Let's go. Okay. So we'll do the critique of the Gotha program. So first we gotta look at the Gotha program really fast. PDF. Let's see if we can find it. Not the critique. Show me the program. What was it? SVP? What the fuck was their German Social Democrat Party? I can't remember the letters. Found it. Okay. Yep. So this is 1875. This is 1875. All right. So here's the actual program. And what you need to know for the historical context of this is, this was a Socialist Workers' Party of Germany. They were a Social Democrat Party. Like actual Social Democrat Party. Like not revolutionary, whatever. And this basically is what their program was that they came out with. They're like, here's what we're fighting for in 1875 in Germany. And it was based on LaSalle. I actually thought LaSalle was still alive when they wrote this version, but he wasn't. He had died. This was like 10 years after he died. But it was still based on him, and it had been his party. So the timeline on that, I get a few years off sometimes. So he was actually dead when they wrote this, but this was based on his teaching still and in his party. So here's what they start off with. He says, labor is the sort... Not him, them. They say labor is the source of all wealth and culture, and since universal productive labor is possible only through society, therefore to society, all of its members belongs the collective product of labor. It sounds good, right? You're like, okay. But if you actually think about this, you're like, what? How is labor the source of all wealth? Like, he's bastardizing Marx, and that's why Marx is like, girl, fuck you. This is wrong. And this is what Marx really takes him to task on. So there's different sections of this. There's this little intro that says labor is the source of all wealth. Liberation of labor demands a transformation of the means of production into common property. And then proceeding from this principle, the Socialist Labor Party seeks free state and socialist society. So free state, Marx is also going to be like, what the fuck's a free state? What the fuck are you saying? There's no such thing as a free state. The state exists to oppress people. Oppress the people who are trying to hurt you then. And then they get into... their demands. The Socialist Labor Party demands universal suffrage, direct legislation, right to bear arms, etc. And, they demand also kind of these new things. So this is what the program is. So this is a Social Democrat Party. They don't believe in revolution. They believe in reform. And they also think that worker collectives are a substitution for revolution at this time. That's what LaSalle thinks anyway. He's really into worker collectives, and he doesn't think that the landowning class necessarily needs to be abolished. So they come out with this, they drop it, and Marx is like, you're using a lot of language that really sounds like it came from the Communist Manifesto there for your little anti-revolution reform party that's full of shit and strange. Let's take you to task for this. And this is what he really does. So he's sassy as fuck about it. He's really sassy. It's kind of like, oh, you're ripping me off, and badly. So the first part of the Gotha program, which we're not going to read this whole thing, is first part of the paragraph, labor is the source of all wealth. He goes, bitch, labor is not the source of all wealth. Nature is also a source of wealth. Hello, duh. We talked about this. And you guys remember, 1 ring equal 40 ramen. He talked about this in chapter 1 of Capital, right? So he's like, this is dumb. You are dumb, right? So he's just kind of going to town on that. This part, interesting, but less relevant to our conversations. Kind of common sense to us because we're communists. We're not reformist social democrats. Okay, so next, he's like, we'll talk about this free state later. Hold on for that. And he wants to talk about the free state. We're going to get into the free state part. We're going to talk about that because I think it's interesting. Part 3, he's talking about, just more things relevant to this physics of the profit, right? Okay, this isn't super, super interesting to me. I think the most interesting part for us to read is part 4. Now, this is where he returns to the free state. And he's like, let's this is also the longest part. He's like, let's get into this, okay? So we don't have time for the whole thing, so that's why we're picking and choosing, sorry. But you should read the whole thing. And you should read the whole Gotha program to understand. And you should read Lassalle and, see what Lassalle believed, because he was kookballs. Lassalle was a kookballs guy. And so to really understand him, and why Marx was like, you are a clown. He was a clown. Now, what's people misinterpret this text to mean? The same kinds of people will misinterpret this text to mean that Karl Marx hated Lassalle because of state. Just because Lassalle thought a state would exist. This is like if you have child ding-dong brain, though. This is not what Marx is talking about. Literally fucking at all at this. So that's where we're going to do this section about Marx talking about the free state. This is not a critique of a state existing. This is a critique of Lassalle being ding-dong brain. And just kind of saying gibberish and appropriating vaguely, doing the lib thing, appropriating vaguely revolutionary language to advance a not revolutionary agenda. Let's get into it. First of all, according to part 2, the German Workers' Party, that's the party, strives for the free state. Free state? What is this? It is by no means the aims of the workers, who have got rid of the narrow mentality of humble subjects, to set the state free. In the German Empire, the state is almost as free as in Russia. Freedom consists in converting the state from an organ superimposed on society into one completely subordinate to it. And today, too, the forms of state are more free or less free to the extent that they restrict the freedom of the state. The German Workers' Party, at least if it adopts this program, shows that its socialist ideas are not even skin deep, in that instead of treating existing society, and this holds good for any future one, as the basis of the existing state, or of the future state, in the case of future society, whatever, it treats the state rather as an independent entity that possesses its own intellectual, ethical, and libertarian basis. And what of the riotous misuse which the program makes of the words present-day state, present-day society, and of the still more riotous misconception it creates in regard to the state to which it addressed its demands? Present-day society is a capitalist society, which exists in all civilized countries more or less, free from medieval admixture, more or less modified by the particular historical development of each country, more or less developed. On the other hand, the present-day state changes with the country's frontier. It is different in the Prusso-German Empire from what it is in Switzerland, and different in England from what it is in the United States. The present-day state is therefore a fiction. Nevertheless, the different states of all the different civilized countries, in spite of their motley diversity or form, all have this in common. That they are based on modern bourgeois society, only one more or less capitalistically developed. They have therefore also certain essential characteristics in common. In this sense, it is possible to speak of the present-day state in contrast with the future, in which its present root bourgeois society will have died off. So the question then arises, what transformation will the state undergo in a communist society? Right? So he's like, you're just saying gibberish here. You're saying all the present-day state, blah, 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 blah. He's like, what are you actually talking about? Are you talking about capitalism? If you're talking about capitalism, say you're talking about capitalism. And if you want to change the current structure of capitalism where you are, okay, how are we going to do it? Let's talk about that then. There's just all these weird words. So he's like, okay, so if you're actually talking about the problems with capitalism, the question then arises, what transformation will the state undergo in communist society? Oh, okay, now we have a question we can ask. In other words, what social functions will remain in existence that are analogous to present state functions? What's going to stay the same? This question can only be answered scientifically, and one does not get a fully hop nearer to the problem by a 1,000-fold combination of the word people with the word state. He's like, you can't just be like, and now it's a people state. He's like, what the fuck does that mean? What are you talking about? Tell me the actual things. Let's talk about what's actually going to stay the same and what's going to change. So he says, between capitalist and communist society, there lies the period of the revolutionary transformation of one into another. Again, not the light switch of socialism. Between capitalist and communist society, there lies the period of the revolutionary transformation of one to the other. Corresponding to this is also a political transition period in which the state can be nothing but the revolutionary dictatorship of the proletariat. So he's like, okay, you undid capitalism. Great. You have a revolution. Now you got a dictatorship of the proletariat. This is who's going to oversee your transition from capitalism to communism. But your program doesn't talk about that. Why? Because they didn't believe in revolution, right? So what do we got going on here, right? And this is the other thing. It's like whatever these people think Critique of the Gotha program proves, it doesn't prove that. What it proves is that you're going to have a transition period in between capitalism and communism. It's going to be long, it's going to be slow, it's going to be difficult, and it's going to be overseen by the dictatorship of the proletariat. Right? That's what it's saying. So, now he says the program does not deal with this, nor with the future state of communist society. Its political demands contain nothing beyond the old democratic litany familiar to all. Universal suffrage, direct legislation, popular rights, a people's militia. These are a mere echo of the bourgeois People's Party, of the League of Peace and Freedom. They are all demands which, insofar as they are not exaggerated in fantastic presentation, have already been realized. Only the state to which they belong does not lie within the borders of the German Empire. Switzerland, the United States, sure, they've got all this shit. They've got all this shit. It's still capitalism, right? Doesn't change anything. So he's saying this sort of state of the future is a present-day state, although existing outside the framework of the German Empire. He's like, what you call your future already exists. It already exists in fucking Switzerland. It already exists in the fucking United States. It's not some future fantastical thing. It already exists, and guess what? It's still not good. But one thing has been forgotten, he says. Since the German Workers' Party expressly declares that it acts within the present-day national state, hence within its own state, the Proto-German Empire, its demands would indeed be otherwise largely meaningless, since one only demands what one has not got. It should not have forgotten the chief thing, namely, that all those pretty little gewgaws rest on the recognition of the so-called sovereignty of the people, and hence are appropriate only in a democratic republic. Lassalle and Mussolini, banned. Since one has not the courage, and wisely so, for the circumstances demand caution, to demand the democratic republic as the French workers' programs under Louis Philippe and under Napoleon did, one should not have resorted either to the subterfuge, neither honest nor decent, of demanding things which have meaning only in a democratic republic from a state which is nothing but a police-guarded military despotism, embellished with parliamentary forms, alloyed with a feudal admixture already influenced by the bourgeoisie, and bureaucratically carpentered, and then to assure this state into the bargain that one imagines one will be able to force such things upon it by legal means. He's like, look, you say it with your whole chest. You don't want to change the existing nature of things. You want to force these reforms that already exist in capitalist countries and aren't good enough, into your state as it exists right now, right? Okay, your capitalist state. Your state, right? Which is a police-guarded military institution. Sure, it's got some parliament there. It's designed to fancy it up and make it look like it's fair when it's not. It's totally influenced and controlled by the bourgeoisie. You think you're going to legally somehow convince this state to give you these great reforms and that's going to set you free as workers? Even if you do, are the workers of Switzerland and the United States free? No. So what's he railing against here? Reformism. He's like, reformism is bullshit. Reformism is bullshit. It's not going to happen. Even vulgar democracy, which sees the millennium in the democratic republic, has no suspicion that it is precisely in this last form of state of bourgeois society that the class struggle has to be fought out to a conclusion. Even it towers mountains above this kind of democratism, which keeps within the limits of what is permitted by the police and not permitted by logic. He's like, you're just playing into the bourgeoisie and what they want, right? It doesn't even make sense. That, in fact, by the word state is meant the government machine, or the state insofar as it forms a special organism separated from society through division of labor, is shown by the words, the German Workers' Party demands as the economic basis of the state a single progressive income tax. Taxes are the economic basis of the government machinery and nothing else. In the state of the future existing in Switzerland, this demand, which is really funny, it's like your state of the future, which already fucking exists in Switzerland, by the way. This demand has been pretty well fulfilled. Income tax presupposes various sources of income of the various social classes, and hence capitalist society. It is therefore nothing remarkable that the Liverpool financial reformers, bourgeois, headed by Gladstone's brother, are putting forward the same demand as the program. He's like, Financial reformers want the same thing as you. What is revolutionary about your demands? How do your demands benefit the working class, really? Equal elementary education. What idealized behind these words? It is believed that in present-day society, education can be equal for all classes? No. Or is it demanded that the upper class shall also be compulsorily reduced to the modicum of education in the elementary school that alone is compatible with the economic conditions, not only of the wage workers, but of the peasants as well? So he's like, do you really think under capitalism, the rich kids and the poor kids are going to get the same education? That all the poor kids are going to get the same quality education the rich kids do? Or are you saying we should take the rich kids out and send them to the shitty, underdeveloped public schools that we reserve for our working poor? What do you realistically think is going to happen? None of this is going to happen without a revolution, bro. That's his whole point of this. His whole critique of this program is not state. It is reform. It is the failures of reformism. Right? That is what this is about. Universal compulsory school attendance, free instruction. The former exists even in Germany. The second in Switzerland and in the United States in the case of elementary schools. In some states of the latter country, higher education institutions are also free. That only means, in fact, defraying the cost of education of the upper class from the general tax receipts. Incidentally, the same holds good for free administration of justice, demanded under A5. The administration of criminal justice is to be had free everywhere. That of civil justice is concerned almost exclusively with conflicts over property, and hence affects almost exclusively the possessing classes. Are they to carry on their litigation at the expense of the national coffers? It's like most of the administration of justice is concerned with protecting property rights for the rich. So now we're all going to pay for them to protect their property rights? So again, he's just like, these changes within the confines of a capitalist society give you nothing. They're ding-dong brain. This is why reformism is ding-dong brain. This isn't going to save you. That's what this all is. Elementary education by the state is altogether objectionable. Defining by a general law the expenditures of the elementary schools, the qualifications of the teaching staff, the branches of the instruction, etc., and as is done in the United States, supervising the fulfillment of these legal specifications by state inspectors, is a very different thing from appointing the state as the educator of the people. Government and church should rather be equally excluded from any influence on the school, particularly indeed in the Prusso-German Empire, and one should not take refuge in the rotten subterfuge that one is speaking of, state of the future. We have seen how matters stand in this respect. The state has need, on the contrary, of a very stern education by the people. He's like, you're going to let your bourgeois state educate your children, and you think that's good enough? No. The people need to be educating the state, if anything. The people need to be directing things and telling people how things go. The whole program, for all its democratic clang, is tainted through and through by Lassallean sect's servile belief in the state, or what is no better, by a democratic belief in miracles, right? So what he's saying here is not in a state, he's saying in the existing state, the capitalist state, to grant you miracles. That's what his critique is. Servile belief in the state is not in like a state existing anywhere. He's saying of the current state that you are in, that we are in. The German state, our Germany, you have a servile belief that our Germany is going to grant you miracles, right? And he says, okay, fine, maybe it's a compromise between two kinds of beliefs in miracles, right? Both equally remote from socialism. He's like, this is not socialism. Don't sell this as socialism, man. This is not socialism. You want the capitalist country of Germany to grant you miracles that it's not capable of providing. So, yes, the state, not a state, exactly. So, the whole program, he's saying, is just not socialism. It's just bullshit being sold as socialism, right? This is, what is it, the Working Families Party here in the United States. It's not real. They're stealing our language. They're using our rhetoric to advance something that's a non-starter, to advance something that's repressive, to advance something that's never going to give you liberation. Freedom of science, says paragraph of the Prussian Constitution. Why then here? Freedom of conscience. If one desired, at this time of the Kulturkampf, to remind liberalism of its old catchwords, it surely could have done away only with the following term. Everyone should be able to attend his religious as well as his bodily needs without the police sticking their noses in. But the Workers' Party ought, at any rate in this connection, to have expressed its awareness of the fact that bourgeois freedom of conscience is nothing but the toleration of all possible kinds of religious freedom of conscience, and that for its part its endeavors rather to liberate the conscience from the witchery of religion. But one chooses not to transgress the bourgeois level. I have come now to the end I love that he says this too. I've come now to the end, for the appendix that now follows in the program does not constitute a characteristic component part of it. Hence, I can be very brief. And that's it, the appendix. So, these are the big texts that are supposed to convince you that China isn't doing Marxism. The DPRK isn't doing Marxism. That Karl Marx actually hated the idea of a state existing at all. That he loved decentralized government. Where is it, though? And this is why they tell you, oh, read Critique of the Gotha program. Okay. Where? What part? Where? I'm reading it. What are you seeing in here? They don't understand who Lassalle is. So they don't understand the critiques of Lassalle. They don't get it. They don't understand he was a weird little reformist man who didn't even think the landlord class should be abolished. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Yeah, basically, yeah. He's like, you are ding dong. We are done. Right? It is very, very funny. I think it's quite funny. So I know that you guys covered this in Virgo's stream, the letter to Bebel. It's great, but I am just going to read this part again, just because it ties in with it. Let's find it. Here we go. The free people's state is transformed into the free state, Engels says. Grammatically speaking, a free state is one in which the state is free vis-a-vis of its citizens, a state that is with a despotic government. All the palaver about the state ought to be dropped, especially after the Commune, which had ceased to be a state in the truest sense of the term. So what is he saying? All this shit, all these problems you guys have with the fucking state, the state. He's like, look, it's not even the same. When the workers take control and make a state, it's not, all the shit you didn't like about your existing state, it's not even there. It's a totally different thing. So, like, why do you care? It's the people in power. It's not you. That's not the state being empowered over its people. That's what he's saying here. He's like, it's not even the same. The dictatorship of the proletariat, all the shit you don't like about your existing state doesn't even apply with the dictatorship of the proletariat. So just, like, drop the whole state thing. And it's so funny because left comms will look at this. All the palaver about the state ought to be dropped. And they'll be like, yes. The reason why the Commune was okay is because it was special and magical, and nothing else has dropped the state. Like, what? Are you brain dead? Are these people fucking brain dead? No. The people's state, he goes on to say, has been flung in our teeth ad nauseum by the anarchists, although Marx's anti-Proudhon piece, and after it, the Communist Manifesto, declare outright that with the introduction of the socialist order of society, the state will dissolve itself and disappear. It will, by the time we get there. Now, since the state is merely a transitional institution of which use is made in the struggle, in the revolution, to keep down one's enemies by force, it is utter nonsense to speak of a free people's state. So long as the proletariat still makes use of the state, it makes use of it. Not for the purpose of freedom, but of keeping down its enemies. And as soon as there can be any question of freedom, the state such ceases to exist. Right? So, what is Engels saying here? It is delusional to think the state is going to grant you anything. The state exists to oppress your enemies. And as long as you still have enemies, as long as the dictatorship of the proletariat has enemies that seek to undo its revolution, it will require a state. And the primary function of that state will be to oppress the people who seek to undo your revolution. So that brings us to the world today. Is there any country in the world today that does not have enemies that seek to oppress it, that does not, especially if they are communist, if they've had a worker revolution, that does not have enemies that seek to overthrow the revolution? No. So every country that has had a worker revolution must therefore have a state that it makes use of to oppress its enemies. That is its function. That is what it is for. That is what we are doing. This idea that we somehow should have seen mass decentralization of state or the dissolvement of the state, the dissolution of the state, is anti-Marxist, right? That's how you protect yourself. That's how you keep yourself alive, right? So this part is everything that people think Stalin did bad is literally what Marx and Engels are talking about when they talk about the role of the state in the revolution, right? That's literally what they're talking about. This comes from Engels himself. As long as the proletariat still makes use of the state, it makes use of it. If you are in the working class, if you are a worker and you have your revolution and you still need the state to do things for you, like oppress your enemies, then you need it. Who fucking cares? Who fucking cares how big or small it is? You need it. You're using it. Use it. Why do we even care about this? Why are we talking about this? Literally, that was Engels' position on this, right? All the complaints you have about your existing state under capitalism, they don't even fucking apply to the worker state. It's like not even the same thing. So why are you getting mad at them? It's not even the same. Just let it go. You're theoretically obsessed with this idea of state. Just fucking let it go. Right? And that's what Engels is saying. So I don't know. I don't know what's up with the left comms, guys. I don't think they're reading the texts. I don't think they're understanding the texts if they are reading them. I think these are pretty obvious, right? So their next thing is about they're obsessed with the mode of production. They're obsessed with the mode of production. They don't think it's a transition. They don't think a transition occurs. They think immediately you need to cease commodity production and enter socialist mode of production. That's their other thing. So maybe next week we'll tackle some texts that directly deal with this issue, because Marx is pretty explicit that there's a transition stage that will be marked by the old elements of capitalism that came before it, and also that you need capitalism to sufficiently develop productive forces. Maybe not everywhere, but most places. He's pretty obvious about that. So I think that will be something maybe we can tackle next week to get into as well. You know. Yes, Weebcore, your resentment of state stems from your current conditions, not the reality of what is proposed. Exactly. Okay, guys, well, we're going to end 9 minutes early. I'm not going to be here tomorrow. No stream tomorrow. And that's okay. Who should we send you to? Virgo, are you going to stream today? Or should we send everybody to Larry? Dang maxing. Oh, can we go to the map and fix the legend? Yeah, we can do that. Hold on, let's do that. What do you guys want to call it? We don't like cucked anymore. We're anti-cucked. What if we say compromised? What about... I'm fucking all the way off. You have serious contention with the demotion of Venezuela. Maybe we should save this all for Monday then, so we could have a convo. You find the demotion of Venezuela to be reactionary? Okay. I can be convinced on the Venezuela. How about, why don't we save all map for Monday? So we can talk about Venezuela, and we can talk about the best terms to use, and then we won't feel rushed. And then I'll have time to pack for my trip in my little lunch break before I start my work. Yes? Okay, let's do that. Let's table it. Tabled for Monday. Okay. I'm going to send you all to Larry. Maps Monday. Have a good weekend, everybody. I will miss you. You'll be with me in Fresno in my heart and spirit. All right. Also, can you see this? Do you see this? This is what happened. This is what happened to her. Raid now.